So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga chapter 398, and let's just say that this chapter really shows that we are approaching the end of Toshinori Yagi when it comes to not only the fight with All for One, but potentially the end of his life and the end of his arc. And we will talk a little bit more about that, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my manga review for My Hero Academia Manga chapter 398. And there's a lot that we really need to talk about in this chapter, as well as some stuff that we may have missed from the previous chapter that is tied into this chapter. But overall, what we get with this chapter is something that we've wanted for a long time. Not just development for All Might, but we actually get to see what life was like for All Might when he was younger, as well as his first interactions with Nana Shimura, as we approach the ending of this fight and potentially the ending of Toshinori Yagi himself. So let's dive into the chapter more and really talk about why this chapter is as great as it is. And the first thing that we need to talk about is actually a comment from Horikoshi, which apparently is to correct something that he may have mistaken in the last chapter. And that is when it came to All Might and the dark shadow cape that he had. In actuality, it was supposed to be named after Tokoyami's actual hero name, Tsukuyomi, which makes sense with the aesthetic that All Might is naming when it comes to these moves or these items, how they're named after the hero names of his fellow, or should I say, his students. And that is something important that we really need to talk about, because we do get more reveals of other students that are a part of his All Might armor and car, especially with what we saw at the end of the last chapter, where we actually, if you noticed, and this is something that I missed, that there was something coming out of Hercules heading in the direction of All Might. And it's later to be revealed as Super Acid Injection Pinky, which we see that apparently it's filled with acid that is destroying All for One from the inside out. And this is very cool because from what it seems like in this moment, he actually catches it in midair and stabs it into All for One by pushing the injection button as well. And this could be a potential callback to the cultural festival where he was able to reflexively catch a flying ball in midair, showing that even though he is in a weakened state, he still very much has the reflexes that he had as a hero and with the power of One for All. And we're going to see in this chapter why that's important to fighting people like All for One, with especially how this entire fight is affecting All Might, or should I say Toshinori's body. But even with all that bluster and even getting a major hit on All for One in this moment, Toshinori is still sent flying as we actually begin to go into a flashback of how All Might Toshinori met Nana Shimura. And we see that he was just following her around and wanted to be the disciple under Nana Shimura. And from this point, we do learn some more information about both of these characters. For instance, they do have something in common where apparently both of their families were killed during the time where quirks were running amok and heroes weren't as proper or well known as they are in modern My Hero Academia. So both All Might's parents are dead and Nana's parents were dead. And Nana in this moment is assuming that Toshinori just wants revenge because she knows at this point that he is quirkless. And what Toshinori says in this moment is exactly what he said to Nana Shimura within the first time that we saw their interaction during the fight between All for One and All Might and Kamino for their second battle. And what's very interesting about this is what actually convinces Nana Shimura to more or less give the power over to Toshinori in this moment. And that we see that it may not exactly be the words that he said, but how he said it. Because we pretty much get an exact similar scene to what we got in that Toshinori versus All for One fight in Kamino, where we get the exact same background of Toshinori talking to Nana Shimura. But what is different in this moment is that we actually flip to the other side, where we actually get to see how much destruction was occurring during this time frame, where at first everything seemed picturesque from the side of Toshinori, but when we flip it, we see a whole bunch of destruction, black spires coming out of the ground, really just showing how bad the time of the original quirks were being introduced was. And this is something that we've really been looking forward to, really seeing how the world was before the hero and the hero system came into vogue and came into what it is right now. And we see that it was even worse than we could have ever imagined. But even with all of that, we get great characterization for who Toshinori is at his core. Because even though he knew he didn't have a place in the world because he was quirkless, and even though he knew that he could only protect people realistically within a certain perimeter around him, he had a great understanding of what it meant for the world to need a symbol of peace moving into the future. Because he brings up the idea that you can build more buildings, build more houses, but that's not going to take away the fear that is instilled within this people. And that the darkness that exists within them will always be there and will never give them peace. Especially when you have villains doing all of this destruction and that there's nothing that they can really do about it. And this is probably the moment where Toshinori convinces Nana to give him the power of One for All, because as she's questioning like why he is pursuing power, Toshinori pretty much says that I'm quirkless. I was born without a role, but if there's people protecting their loved ones, then I'm going to be the person to protect everyone else. Basically, he realizes that the people are so busy protecting themselves that they can't look at the big picture, so he's going to be the one to actually do it. He took it upon himself at this young age to be the symbol that the world needed at this time so that people can live happier and safer lives, which is pretty much the core of who All Might has always been. And that what convinces Nanashimura most likely is the glow and the honest truth within All Might's eyes in that moment at this young age, and it just looks beautiful. And this eye motif is very important for what we're going to get later on in the chapter. And that's pretty much the end of the flashback, and this is where we get back into modern times of the fight between All For One and Toshinori, where we actually get a very great reference back to the first scene that we saw more or less in chapter 1 of Tatooine Station, in pretty much the exact same paneling where we saw Deku seeing that giant villain fight against Kamui Woods. But this time, we see that All Might blows through Tatooine Station, and we see how it's in tatters, and he gets launched into multiple buildings, hits one of the buildings that is actually the same building he talked to Deku on. And this is where we get a little bit more confirmation that All Might is definitively distracting All For One, because even though they are closer to UA, he is actually going on a detour specifically to target All Might, pretty much showing that All Might may be the only person that can actually lure and trick All For One in this way. And as this is all happening, we get a better understanding of how much damage Toshinori is facing in this fight. He has fractured ribs, his whole body is damaged, and his respiratory system is malfunctioning. And we see that he still has the suit somewhat relatively intact, but it's still not protecting him from all of the damage that he's sustaining. So while the suit is being able to negate some of the damage, it's not able to get rid of it completely, and he is being hammered in hard and is really feeling the damage. And as this is all happening, he remembers back to what he said to All Might. And he remembers the moment that he was talking to Deku at that young age, and how Deku really pretty much reminded him of what he was at his age, as well as he remembers what Stain said about how this was the only way that All Might could live, and that there was no other way he could live his life. And with that memory in mind, he's able to stand up once again, the suit trying to reinforce his broken body even more as he notices that All For One is getting younger, and how he's trying to make sure that All For One can no longer think rationally, as he comes to a conclusion that, oh, All For One was able to get rid of the acid by having Rewind accelerate. So he comes to the conclusion that he was able to force Rewind to go faster by the fact that he looks significantly younger. And as he says this, he begins to laugh and laugh, as he calls more equipment to his location from Hercules, as he gives a very fantastic monologue as thoughts are going through his head, as we just have an entire panel of just flashbacks of his interactions with Deku, with Bakugo, with everyone that he's interacted with up until this moment, as he is laughing his butt off, as he begins to conclude with how it feels great to help, as he thinks about how we can win, as he remembers certain phrases that he has most likely said to the kids, as he finishes off the chapter more or less calling on some more equipment that I'm going to name off are very prominent characters in Class 1A. Because he talks about Gravity Thruster, as well as Ingenium, Maximum Output. But we also see that there's a crow that is most likely referencing to Koda. We see that he has Doc Ock arms, which is most likely in reference to Shoji due to the fact of his name being in reference to octopus. As well as we see that he has a tail very similar to Ojiro, really showing that everything a part of his suit and a part of Hercules was specifically inspired by the students of Class 1A. As we get in the last part of the chapter of the vestige inside of One for All, inside of Deku, most likely telling Deku that All Might is fighting right now, as All Might also realizes that his protege, young Midoriya, is also fighting, ending the chapter. And what is very amazing about his declaration is that when he is saying that he's so happy that he's helping people, his actual eyes go from black to white, which shows that he's returning back to the young man that he once was, who wanted to help people no matter what. Because what All Might is not the symbol of peace, not just the #1 hero. All Might is Toshinori Yagi, and what Toshinori Yagi wants the most is to help everyone and to help people, because that is the type of person that he is. That is where the ideals of All Might come from. And this is just what he will always do, because that's just who he is. So there is a lot going on in this chapter. The reinforcement of the type of character that Toshinori is, and the fact that this chapter is called Toshinori Yagi Rising Origins, which is a reference to multiple chapters where we have either characters going through the rising, doing something very heroic, as well as we get origins, as in like what they were before they began on their journey. Where the first chapter was literally Izuku Midoriya Origins, as well as later chapters when it comes to Bakugo Rising, as well as Shoto Todoroki Rising. What is great about this is because now Toshinori Yagi is no longer just what All Might was. He is his own person. He's outside of the symbol of All Might. He has gone back to what he was before he became All Might. Toshinori Yagi. We see his origins as well as we see his rising. Because now he's not just fighting because he's a #1 hero, or because it is the duty of what it means to be a hero, but he's doing this because he wants to, because what he wants to do is make sure that everyone is safe, including Deku. Which kind of ties into what All Might's journey is. It's just remembering his origin, remembering why he got involved with heroics, not just to be the symbol of peace, but specifically to make sure that people are safe, and that everything that has been built up into the story is building up to this moment of All Might relearning the lesson that he learned long ago and now applying it now. And I can make an entire video really explaining why this all makes sense for Toshinori Yagi's character, but that's for another day. But overall, I really did enjoy the story that this chapter was telling. I really just enjoy how Toshinori is making reference to all of his equipment based off his class. I really enjoyed the flashback to how he met Nana Shimura and the implication that Nana Shimura gave the quirk of One for All to him because of the earnestness that was Toshinori Yagi at that age, as well as just getting to see how he may be the only character that could actually be able to defeat All for One and using all of this equipment to do so. But overall, I thought this was a fantastic chapter, and apparently we do not have a break next week, so I will hopefully be able to get more of the conclusion of this fight within the next chapter, which is going to be 399, which is either going to be when this fight concludes, or most likely chapter 400, where the fight between All for One and One for All will end completely between All for One and Toshinori Yagi. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for the topic right now. What did you think of the chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Do you think that this fits with the character of Toshinori Yagi? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!